Welcome to the Grand Narrative. My name is Mos Mshamete, and today I'm going to interview what I call a true Afrikaner. There are white people in South Africa who call themselves Afrikaners, but Afrikaner means African. Now this is an Afrikaner in the real sense, in the true tradition of the great Beyers Naudé. We have today in our studio Mr. Niehaus, and I'd like him to tell his grand narrative. Mr. Niehaus, I'd like to start at the beginning, where you grew up, but I actually want to know, most of what I want to know is, why did an Afrikaner boy leave South African white privilege? And not just, you see, in South Africa we have liberals. Liberals talk there, they talk politics, but you did not just talk politics, you just went and threw your whole body in. What happened? What started your journey in politics?
Mos, I first want to acknowledge that introduction and that you referred to Dr. Beyers Naudé. I'm very humbled by that comparison. Later on, as I tell my life story, I will be able to tell you the role that Dr. Beyers Naudé played in my life. But let me start with your question. I was born in the old Western Transvaal, in a small town with the name of Zeerust. I was born in 1959 on Christmas Day, in a white hospital, in a white town, with very conservative Afrikaners in that town and also the farmers around that town. And my family came out of that conservative Afrikaner community. My mother came from farmers in the Groot Mariku. You know Herman Charles Bosman, who wrote so much about the Groot Mariku,
Yes,
beautiful
yes.
books.
Yes.
My mum grew up there.
Yes.
My dad, his father was working on the railways in Zeerust. He was what they called a rangeerder, a shunter on the railways. So lower Afrikaner, working class Afrikaner stock. That is where I came from. And as I grew up, of course, I grew up in that Afrikaner racist community. I was there until I was 13 years old, and then my dad was transferred to work on the railways in Johannesburg, in Braamfontein. He was a fitter and turner. So I moved from this very conservative, small town, Afrikaner background to the big city, to Johannesburg. But again, my parents went to an Afrikaner suburb, Witpoortjie, in Krugersdorp, and we stayed there. So I continued to live in this conservative Afrikaans community. And yes, as a young boy, as I grew up, obviously I accepted my environment. But at the age of 16, I became involved in my church in what we called a mission group. And that group of young people went into Soweto. The first time that I went to Soweto was when I was 16 years old. Now that in itself is already an indication of the sick racist society that we had in South Africa. To think that you don't see how the majority of your fellow South Africans live their lives until you're 16 years old.
Yeah.
That indicates how deep racism was. But when I went there, one of the visits that we paid was to a hostel, a mining hostel. And it is ingrained in my mind that the terrible living conditions that I saw there, the terrible poverty that I saw.
Yes.
But the thing that really touched me, there was an old man when we were standing there in the lounge in the dining room of that hostel. He was sitting on a tin, on a paraffin tin. And when this young white, in Afrikaans snotneus, walked in there, this old man, who could have been my father or my grandfather, jumped up and he presented this paraffin tin to me to sit on. And it rattled me. I felt it was wrong.
Yeah.
I could understand that this is not the way things should be. This man is my elder.
Yes.
So I started asking questions.
Asking
I
who?
started asking myself, but why am I living in this comfortable white suburb?
Yes.
Why am I having a nice house to live in? While I see the majority of black and African South Africans living in the dire poverty
Yes.
that I saw in Soweto. And those days, Soweto was much worse than it is today.
Yes.
There's still the huge gap between rich and poor. There's still the white-black divide in South Africa, sadly so, after 30 years of democracy. But those days it was much worse. So it raised a question in my mind, which was a needling question. How can we allow this? I stood up in my history class in my very Afrikaans school,
Yes.
which was called Hoërskool die Adelaar in Witpoortjie.
Okay.
And I said to the history teacher, I think the students who are
Revolting.
in Soweto are correct. It caused an outrage. My parents were actually called in by the headmaster.
Yes.
He said he thinks that I'm politically subversive, that he was even considering to expel me from the school. Because at the same time, you know, they had these what they called cadets, which was young Afrikaner boys in the school who get trained how to shoot,
Yes.
who get trained how to march around, you know, paramilitary
Yes,
stuff.
yes, yes.
And when the Soweto uprising started, they got these young boys to now protect the perimeter of the school. To say, you must be scared because the youngsters from Soweto will come here and burn your school down and attack the white community. And they wanted me to be part of that kind of parade
Yes.
there and protecting the school, and I refused. I said, no,
No.
I'm not going to do that. So when I did those things, it caused quite an uproar in the school. I was quite outspoken.
Okay.
I always participated in the school debating society.
Okay.
And I raised those issues even in those debates.
debates, yeah.
That I think that South Africa is an unjust, unequal, and very racist society.
Yes.
And the consequence of that was that I was almost expelled from the school. But
Yes.
anyhow, fortunately, I managed to finish my matric, as we called it then, grade
Yes.
12.
Mm-hmm.
But there was another incident during that same time, because I grew up in the Dutch Reformed Church, the NG Kerk.
Yes.
And during that time, I was going through what we call in Afrikaans catechese, to be
Yes.
accepted
Catechism.
as a full member
Catechism, yes.
in the church.
Yes.
And I started looking at the Bible. And I'm getting all these interpretations, especially from the Old Testament, that God treated the Jews as the special people,
Yes.
you know, the blessed people of God. And this direct comparison between the Afrikaners and the Jews.
And the Jews, yes.
And introducing what I can now understand as a theology of apartheid,
Yes.
which said the same way in which the Jews
Was special.
were the privileged selected people by God.
Yes.
The Afrikaners were the privileged selected people. And the same way in which the Bible says that the so-called heathens
Okay.
must be the carriers of water and the hackers of wood.
Yes.
The black people in this country must be that.
Must be that, yes.
So I questioned with my dominee, with the reverend,
Yes.
these things. I said, but I don't think this is a correct interpretation of the Bible.
Yes.
And again, my parents were called in. It caused a lot of uproar.
Okay.
And they then said to me, I better change my way, otherwise I cannot be accepted into the church.
Into
And
the
I
church.
said to the dominee, you know what? Then leave me out.
Yes.
But I can't accept this kind of interpretation of the Bible.
Yes.
Now, this was when I was in matric.
Okay.
Then I went to the Rand Afrikaans University,
Yes.
the old RAU.
Yes.
Those days, RAU was a bastion of conservative Afrikaners. You must remember that RAU was specially built by the Broederbond
Yes.
in order to counter what was in Johannesburg only English-speaking universities, and specifically the liberal university of the Witwatersrand.
Yes.
They said, no, we must create a home, a bastion for young Afrikaner youth,
Yes.
where they can be brought up in the culture of the Afrikaner. The head of the university, Rand Afrikaans University, was Professor Gerrit Viljoen,
Okay.
who at that stage was also the chairman of the Afrikaner Broederbond.
Yes.
So you can imagine the kind of place it was.
Yes.
Me being who I am,
Yes.
when I got there, I started getting involved in student politics.
Yes.
I met a young woman who became my fiancée later. Her name was Jansie Lawrence.
Okay.
She had the fortunate situation that her dad went to study in the United States,
Yes.
in the south of the United States.
Okay.
It's important to emphasize that,
The South.
in the south.
Yes.
Because he went there and she grew up in the south. A primary school education she received there. And they started to know about the civil rights movement, the fight for black people in America
Yes.
to get their rights.
Yes.
So she was much more open-minded
Okay.
than any of the other Afrikaner students that I got to know there.
Yes.
So Jansie and I talked, and we found in ourselves a kindred spirit. We
Yes.
agreed that these things are wrong.
Okay.
So I got involved in the student politics of Rau.
Yes.
I decided to stand for the Student Representative Council in my
Yes.
second year.
Yes.
And I made a speech there where I said, this university must be open for everyone.
Okay.
It caused an uproar. So, in the middle of the night, suddenly there were people with pillowcases pulled over their heads that I couldn't identify them,
Okay.
with pieces of hosepipe that they'd cut off.
Okay.
And they started beating me. They broke my ribs, they broke my shoulder. I ended up for 2 weeks with concussion and quite serious injuries. But you know, I'm a strange character. You do something like that to me, you don't scare me.
Yes.
You make me double determined that I will take you on.
You went to question the NG Kerk when they were trying to actually induct you into the church.
Yeah.
You went to Rau and saw the outrage of Rau, just looking at why is everybody not here? Why is it all only Afrikaners and all that? And you started with your fiancé. One would say maybe you were a sucker for punishment because because you're sitting in this place, where Afrikanerdom reigns, and people are happy. Yeah, because if you were to be told that you are a superior race, for example, and most of the education is about that, you should be happy. So there were so many happy people, and these happy people, you're starting to disturb them.
And you see, that started at school already.
Already in high school?
Yeah, because the same thing that you describe about the university was, of course, true for the school.
Of course.
It was a white, privileged school,
Yes.
where people were much better off, the students were much better off than the majority
Yes.
of young people in South Africa.
If I may ask you, you mentioned a few situations where your parents were called in.
Yeah.
At the school, when you refused to become a cadet, and all those things. What were they saying? What were your parents saying to you?
Now, of course, my parents were confused and outraged.
They were outraged by you, just
By
like
me,
everybody.
not,
Yes.
not by the people who complained about me. In fact, they agreed
They agreed
with
you.
what those teachers were saying and those people in the church were saying. Because I think my parents were saying, oh, well, this is a teenager, you know? He's being difficult, he's going through a difficult stage.
Yes.
But the problem for them is the stage continued.
Yes.
Because it went from school to university.
Yes.
And I was explaining to you earlier, then I put up those posters
Yes.
calling for Mandela to be released and
Yes.
for the university to be open to everyone.
Okay.
And of course I was caught on the closed circuit cameras.
Okay.
And I was then brought before the university council.
Yes.
I was charged and I was expelled from the university.
You expelled from the
I
university?
was expelled. And for my dad, this was a terrible thing. Remember, we were not rich people.
Yes.
My dad was a working class Afrikaner.
Yeah.
I got bursaries to go to university from Afrikaans institutions, from what was called the Afrikaner Culture and Language Association, ATKV.
Yes.
And when I was expelled, they immediately demanded that those monies must be paid back. And my dad ended up having to mortgage the house again in order to pay that money back. So it made him hugely angry. It costed him financially. It was embarrassing to him because it became known in the whole community there that I was expelled from the Rand Afrikaans University because I'm a communist. Because remember, when you say that Mandela must be released from prison, you are a communist.
Yes, yes, yes.
So at the age of 18, my dad kicked me out of the house. He said, I had enough of you, go.
Yes.
And I ended up walking the streets. For 2 weeks, I had no place to stay. I didn't know where to go. I used to sleep on park benches.
An Afrikaner child.
And after that, while I'm sleeping there on the park bench, walking the streets, because I was also hard-headed, when my dad said to me, go, I left.
You still are.
I wasn't going to, of course I am.
Yes.
Perhaps another kind of person, another child,
Yes.
would have turned around and come back that night and said, look, I'm sorry. When, it starts getting dark and you don't know where, I said, yeah, the man chased me, I'm leaving.
I'm leaving, yes.
So about 2 weeks while I was now sleeping on park benches and so on, I saw a poster,
Yes.
a newspaper poster,
Yes.
which said that Father Simeon Nkwane was then the dean of the Anglican Church in St. Mary's Cathedral in Johannesburg, CBD,
Yes.
was fasting and praying because people are being evicted from informal settlements.
Okay.
I looked at this, I said, but perhaps this man will be able to understand me. Remember, I had no one.
Yes.
I didn't have a support community.
No, actually you were against the committee.
I was on my own.
Yeah, you were on your own.
So I found my way to St. Mary's.
Okay.
The secretary of Pastor Nkwane was really surprised to see this because by now, remember, I'm almost homeless.
Yeah,
I'm sleeping on park benches.
Yes.
So I'm looking rather,
Shabby.
ruffled and dirty. So to find this young, dirty-looking boy coming to us to speak to the dean.
Yes.
But I was insistent I want to see. Eventually he saw me.
Yeah.
And he sat and he listened to my story and he said to me, young man, I think I know someone
Yes.
who will understand your situation better than I can understand it.
Yes.
Come back tomorrow.
Okay.
So the next day I came back.
Okay.
I remember it was 4:00 in the afternoon and I walked into his office and I got the fright of my life.
Okay.
Because there was an oldish looking man in a safari suit.
Yes.
You know those short
Yes,
safari
I remember
suits
those, yeah.
with the socks and the comb in the sock, the whole outfit.
Okay.
And I thought, oh, he's gone and called the police.
Okay.
This is a policeman who's going to arrest me now.
Yes.
So I was scared.
Yes.
And then it turned out that elderly man who was sitting there was Beyer Snowdeer. That's how I met Wambay.
Okay.
And we sat and we spoke, and Wambay then took me
Sorry.
from the
Sorry for my tears. I'm like that.
No, Wambay then took me from Father Simeon Nkwane's
Okay.
office to his house.
Yes.
And I stayed a couple of days at Wambay's house.
Yes.
With Tannie Ilse,
That's the
Wambay's wife.
Yes.
And it was the usual Afrikaner welcome, the same food that my mum used to make.
Yes.
It was an Afrikaans home.
Yes.
But what Wambay was talking was very different.
Yes.
He was telling me, hey, young man, apartheid is wrong.
Yeah.
But I understand why you are being kicked out.
Yes.
And he used to tell me, because now, remember, I'm getting angry. I want to reject everything that is Afrikaans.
Yes.
I feel that these people have rejected me, I'm rejecting them. And he used to say to me, don't reject your roots. Understand where you come from.
Okay.
Because a tree without roots get blown over by the wind very quickly.
Okay.
understand where you come from, but also understand how wrong apartheid is. Wimbe's father was the founder of the Broederbond.
You're not serious?
Wimbe's father, in Wimbe's family home where he was born,
Yes.
the Broederbond was formed.
Yes.
And this man spoke out. So in the congregation which he was here in Johannesburg called the Asvoelkop congregation, which was really the elite of the Afrikaners in Johannesburg,
Yes.
went to that church.
Yes.
They expelled him.
Yeah.
And by the time I met him, he was then expelled. He had started the Christian Institute, which was an institute working to work with Black and African South Africans and to work for full liberation.
Yes.
And he had moved from the Dutch Reformed Church in Asvoelkop
Okay.
to a congregation in Alexandra.
Okay.
And he was the co-priest, the joint priest with Reverend Sam Booty,
Okay.
who was at that stage the moderator of the Dutch Reformed Church in Africa. Because remember what the Afrikaners did. They started their white church.
Okay.
They created, in the same way that the rest of apartheid worked,
Yeah.
they created an African church,
Yes.
they created an Indian church,
Okay.
they created a colored church.
Yes. Okay.
When you talk about it today, it's outrageous, but they
Yes.
did it.
Yeah.
Now, Wimbe went and he became a priest in that Dutch Reformed Church in Africa, in Alex,
Okay.
and he took me there.
Okay.
Now, I was
It
unemployed.
took the, at the time, you now had found a home in his home.
I found a home in his home.
Yes.
Eventually, he helped me to find a small little apartment where I lived.
Okay.
And he took me to that church, and I became a member of that church,
Okay. Of a black church.
of that black church.
Yes.
But now you must remember, those days, you couldn't just enter a black township as a white person without a permit.
You needed a permit.
You needed a permit to go into a black township. And I refused. I said, no ways. I am a human being.
Yes.
Everyone in Alex are human beings.
Yes.
Why must I ask for a permit
permit.
from this state to go to my church?
Yes.
So every Sunday, and it became a little bit farcical, every Sunday I would come in my little car. I had a little Datsun Nissan, a small little car,
Yeah.
old car.
Yeah.
And I would drive, and as I get into entering Alex,
Okay.
the police would be there.
All right.
Then they arrest me.
They arrest
Where's
you.
your permit?
Yeah.
No, I don't have a permit. You're under arrest. Then I go to Bramley Police Station.
Okay.
So most Sundays I spent in Bramley Police Station. And sometimes I would use, sneaky little routes and get
Yeah.
into the church.
Okay.
But now we knew. Sam Booty, the pastor, also knew. When I arrived there, he said, oh, they didn't stop you today. Ne? So now the church will be under siege today. Within the first prayer, the
Yes.
police are there.
Yeah.
Then they circle around the church
Okay.
and they come and arrest me. Inside the church.
And you continue to do that.
And I kept on doing that every Sunday for many years.
Yes.
I insisted. But I wasn't employed then. Because I was expelled from the Rand Afrikaans University, it was very difficult to get back into university.
Yes.
Because all the universities has got a joint university council.
Okay.
Even the so-called liberal universities such as Wits were part of that. Because I was expelled, the doors were blocked for me to go to other universities also to go and study.
Yes.
But Wimbe kept on insisting, but you must go back to university. We must find a way. Because in the meantime, while I was now in the church, we started a church project,
Okay.
which was making of furniture, together with the church community. And especially we specialized in upholstered coaches.
Okay.
So I always joke, I know exactly how to make coaches like this. I can do it perfect because I did it for 2 years. That was the work I did to earn my bread and butter. And then eventually a young man who was an academic at the University of the Witwatersrand with the name of David Webster.
I know David Webster.
Met me through Umbay.
Yes.
And he started agitating with the University of Wits to say, but you know, this thing is wrong.
Yes.
This man was expelled because he opposed racism.
Yes.
You say you're against racism also as liberals.
But you want to
Why do you prevent him from having entrance to Wits?
Yes.
And through his agitation, eventually I managed to get in.
Okay.
So I then started studying at Wits.
Okay.
I would still part-time work in the factory making coaches.
What did you study?
I studied social sciences. I studied with Eddie Webster, who was a professor then of labor law and all of those things.
Okay.
So I studied what was my interest in politics.
In politics, yeah.
So I was now at Wits.
Yeah.
So you would think now things would be good for me.
Yeah.
But I entered an institution which was a liberal institution, still dominated by whites.
Yes.
And the student environment was a strange one because it was Niehaus. Now Niehaus was white liberals and semi-radicals who had this student body, which was ostensibly against apartheid. But they didn't like this Afrikaner boy. I also grew up in an Afrikaner home where you dress properly. My dad was a strict man. Every evening after dinner, I would have to go outside on a piece of newspaper, put my shoes there, polished, shine them.
Yes, yes.
Because I must go with nicely shining shoes and properly dressed.
Yes.
So I continued to do that.
Yeah.
That is how I was brought up.
Yes.
And I remember I was once with a group of those young Niehaus students, and they were gossiping about me. They said, "We think he's a policeman. Look at his shoes. That
Yes.
shines like a policeman's shoes."
Yes, yes.
So I wasn't really accepted by
Culture.
by that culture, by that university, by that British English. And very upper class and elite culture.
Yes.
And I felt out also. But where I did find a home, I was telling you how my political consciousness kept on growing.
Yes.
So, and because Umbay also gave me literature to read, and I was engaging with people in Alex, and I saw more and more the consequences of apartheid, the impact on the lives of people.
Yeah.
I eventually sat down with Umbay. I said, "Look, I have to go and join the ANC.
Yes.
I must be part of an organized resistance to this evil system."
Yes.
And Umbay said to me, "Are you sure?"
Yes.
I said, "Yes." And we argued and discussed also the issue around the armed struggle. Because remember, I grew up in an environment where to take up arms against the government was considered to be sacrilege.
Yeah.
Because remember,
terrorism.
Well, actually more than that, sacrilege, because the church says the state is placed there to be the authority of God over you.
Yes, of course.
And I said, no. This system is so evil. This system is destroying people's lives to such an extent that you must be able to resist it in every possible way, including also with violence and with armed struggle.
Yes, yes.
And Umbay and I had a long discussion about that because he believed it too. He understood that.
He believed in the armed struggle.
Yeah,
yes.
He did, absolutely.
Yes.
But he wanted me to come to my own decision.
Yes.
He didn't want to make that decision for me.
Yes.
Because you see, Wimbe was, I always say this, he was the father to me
Yes.
that my father could not be
Yes.
to me.
Yes.
So eventually we agreed I will cross the border to Botswana,
Okay.
but just on an ordinary visit, not like going into exile.
Okay.
And I will meet with some members of the ANC
Okay.
outside the country in Botswana,
Yes.
which I did. And that happened in June 1979.
Okay.
And I was taken out and I was placed on a little hill, a koppie, outside Gaborone.
Yes.
The people who took me there left. And I was standing there like...
They took you to a copy and
they left me because now other people were coming to meet me.
Okay.
And I was standing there on my own.
Yes.
And I could see in the distance there was a motorbike coming.
Yeah.
It was a dirt road, you could see the dust.
The dust, yes.
And when that person who came on the motorbike arrived and he took off his helmet, it was Billy Matsetla.
The one who just passed.
Comrade Billy, who passed on. I was last Saturday at his funeral.
Okay.
So Billy was the comrade who inducted me
Yes.
into the African National Congress.
Okay.
And I said to him when I met with him, I don't just want to join the ANC, I want to join the armed struggle.
Yes.
So I'm here to be fully part of the fight against apartheid.
Yes.
We had a long conversation. We sat on the rocks there for hours talking.
Yes.
Then he said, look, you must come back again.
Okay.
I came back from time to time.
Okay.
Then we developed a plan that I would go on a so-called holiday overseas,
Okay.
but I went for training.
You went for training.
I got training in how to use an AK-47, how to prime a limpet mine. I was even taken to the GDR, but all very undercover.
The GDR?
German Democratic Republic.
Okay.
And I got trained there in intelligence,
Okay.
how to deal with intelligence operations and all of that.
Okay.
But they all said to me, look, we don't think you should actually go into exile.
Okay.
You're a white Afrikaner, you can be more useful to us inside the country.
Yes.
So I came back.
Yes.
And I started working in an underground operation in cell for the ANC and for Umkhonto weSizwe. The main part of those activities were in Alex.
Okay.
So I worked with other comrades in Alexandra.
Okay.
And I started identifying some of those young people that I said they became my brothers
Okay.
and recruited them into the ANC.
Okay.
I'm the one who recruited Paul Mashatile into the ANC. Also Obed Bapela, Obed's late wife, Connie Bapela, Depuo Mfalasi, Depuo Letsatsi Dube.
Okay.
All of those comrades who have become well-known members of the African National Congress, I recruited them into the ANC.
Yes.
And they were part of the cell that I was working with.
Okay.
Now, eventually some of those comrades became exposed.
Okay.
They became as students also because they were part of the Congress of South African Students.
Okay.
The security police started developing an interest in them. And we then decided that they must leave the country.
Okay.
So I was part of that operation to take those comrades,
Okay.
first hide them at a safe house in Rosettenville, St. Peter's Priory,
Yes.
where they stayed for 2 weeks. And then I took them, because I knew the Western Transvaal very well. I grew up there.
Yes.
And I knew how to cross the border into Botswana, also outside the border gates.
Yes.
So we helped them to cross.
Okay.
One of the people who was part of that group was a young man with the name of Vincent Chabalala.
Okay.
And I referred to
You
him
said you're going to
earlier
talk about him.
because he was an incredible leader. Vincent, when he left the country, he went for training. He was one of the best trainees and was well trained and was sent back into the country. But now I want to pause there. When we needed to take that group of young people out, one of the people who was supposed to have come with us, with that group, was Paul Mashatile.
Okay.
But the night when I took them to St. Peter's Priory to hide them there, Paul didn't pitch.
Okay.
He was nowhere to be found.
All right.
So Paul eventually didn't leave with that group.
Okay.
And it worried Vincent. And Vincent said to me when he was leaving, when I come back, I want to meet with Paul. I want to understand what's going on. So that's how he left. So apparently when he came back, one of the first things he did is he got into touch with Paul.
With Paul, yes.
And he wanted to meet him. They met at what was considered to be a safe house in Alex.
Okay.
I don't know what happened in that conversation. It was between the two of them.
Yes.
But an hour after Paul left,
Yes.
the police and the army hit the house.
Okay.
And Vincent put up an amazing fight.
Yes.
He was alone there.
Yeah.
But he kept for 2 hours
Okay.
fighting,
Yes.
shooting,
Yes.
until they shot him dead.
Yes.
But for 2 hours, that young man on his own was fighting the South African apartheid police and army.
Yes.
Then he died.
And he died.
He's a hero.
Yes.
So you see, this struggle of ours, it's very personal. This struggle of ours is one where people dedicated their lives.
Yes.
Young people
Yes.
sacrificed their lives. Vincent Chabalala sacrificed his life.
Yes.
And you see, Mos, for me, that is what informs my conduct every day.
Yeah.
We are not dealing here with a cheap struggle.
Yeah.
It was very, very expensive.
Yes. Very costly.
We paid the price.
Yeah.
Many people paid the price. I'm just giving you this few examples of very personal experiences that I had.
Yeah.
But we can give many more. So what we are going through is the betrayal of that original struggle
Okay.
for full liberation.
Yes.
For me, it is the betrayal of the ideals for which I got thrown out of my Afrikaner family,
Yes.
for which I faced many, many, many sacrifices. I haven't even spoken earlier about the fact that in 1983, because of that underground activity that I was involved in for the ANC inside the country, I was arrested.
Yes.
And I was severely tortured during the time that I was kept in solitary confinement in John Foster Square. A man with the name of Nick Deetliffs, who was a warrant officer, used to come to my cell and beat me to a pulp. He perforated my eardrums. I lost most of my hearing. I can't function without hearing aids.
Yes.
And if I take these hearing aids out, I must read your lips. And it's because of that torture.
Yeah.
So I sat 10 years in prison because on the 24th of November 1983, I was sentenced by the apartheid regime at the High Court in Johannesburg in Pritchard Street.
Yes.
I was sentenced to 15 years of imprisonment for high treason. The prosecutor, a man with the name of Jan Swanepoel, said to me, "Now tell me, Mr. Niehaus, if you get the chance and you ever get out, will you continue the fight against apartheid?" And I said, yes. He said, "What will you do if you can get into close vicinity of Mr. P.W. Botha, who they then called the state president?" I said, "I will kill him."
Yeah.
I said it
Just
in the
like that
doc.
in court.
I said, "I will kill him."
Yeah.
Because he is a victim of the people of this country. He's a perpetrator of crimes against humanity. If I get the chance, I will kill him.
Yeah.
So there were some people in the public gallery, some of my supporters. They started clapping.
Yes.
The judge, Judge Myberg, said to them, "You better be quiet." And he turned to me, he said, "Young man, do you realize that you're under a charge of treason, for which I can give you the death sentence?
Yeah.
He said, any more things like this of you saying what you've just said,
Yes.
I may just decide to hang you.
Yeah.
And I looked up at him, I said, suit yourself, Your Honor.
Like that.
For me, I thought about it. I still feel the same.
Mm-hmm. During this period when you lived in Alexander and went to school at Wits University, where were your parents? And especially your mother, because I think your father was a hard man, but I don't think mothers abandon their children that easily.
I had very little contact with them. In fact, hardly any. Yes, it was hard for my mum.
Okay.
You're right, mothers don't abandon their children easily. Mm-hmm. But remember, my mum also was part of this patriarchal Afrikaner family.
Yes, yes, yes.
My dad was giving the line of march,
yes,
so to speak. So from his side, he was deeply angry with me.
Okay.
And the consequence of it was that I saw very little of them.
Okay.
I did sometimes have a bit of contact.
Okay.
But I can't even recall that it was of much significance. Ombay did try to say I must continue to stay in contact with my family.
Okay.
But it wasn't easy contact.
Yeah.
And I must tell you, it's even up to this day not easy. You know, if I can jump quickly forward, I'm married to an African woman.
Yes.
And I'm never comfortable to take my wife
home
to go and meet, even my dad has passed on now, but to go and meet my mum and my sister.
Yes.
Because the discomfort of that environment and the way in which they treat her, I cannot tolerate.
Yes.
So even when I go for family gatherings,
Yes.
like recently it was my mother's 94th birthday,
Okay.
I went on my own.
Yes.
And I discussed it with Noluthando, my wife, and we agreed to look, let's not subject her to that kind of behavior.
Yes.
Because the racism is there.
Yeah.
And you know, I can't escape it, she can't escape it.
Yes.
And unfortunately, my mum and even my sister, they're not going to change.
Yeah. I know that you left home for a very long time before you were finally arrested. What did your family ever talk to you about it? Did they visit you when you were in jail? Did the relationship improve?
You know, it's a painful thing because, as I told you, I was thrown out of the house by my dad. When I was arrested and when I was charged and also going through the court case, my parents did come to attend the court case.
Okay.
But they did so, I think, with a lot of pain.
All right.
And also with a lot of discomfort because they didn't agree with me.
Okay.
You know, the difficult thing was they were more in agreement with the prosecutor and the judge than with me.
Yes.
And when I made those statements like, you know, I will continue with the struggle against apartheid, I'm even prepared to kill P.W. Botha, they were appalled, they were disgusted that their son can say such things.
Yes.
They did come and visit me very irregularly in prison.
What were they saying to you?
Once in 6 months, once in a year, you know. It was painful to them. It was very painful, especially for my mum to come to the prison, to see her son in the prison uniform. And remember, those prison visits are not like you and I sit and talk here.
Yes.
It's not a direct contact visit. There's a thick bulletproof glass between you. There's a microphone that you speak through, like on a telephone.
Yes.
So it's a very abnormal situation. You can't really be warm and reach out to anyone.
Yeah.
So the separation between me and my family, I think prison added to it.
Okay.
It caused even further separation.
All right.
My first love in my life, the woman with who I was also involved in the political activities at the Rand Afrikaans University, Yancy.
Mm-hmm.
She was also sentenced to 4 years when I was given a 15-year sentence.
Okay.
So she spent 4 years in prison.
Okay.
When she came out, it was difficult because we couldn't see each other
All right.
for a long time.
Okay.
We did apply to get married in prison
Okay.
while she was out already.
All right.
And eventually we were allowed to get married. But again, it was a very difficult, artificial wedding.
Yeah.
Because it's in the presence of prison authorities and controlled. It strips you of what a marriage should be and a wedding ceremony should be about.
Okay.
But we did get married. So when I came out of prison, I was now for 10 years in prison. Yancy was for 4 years in prison. I was a young man of 23 when I went into prison. She was a young woman of 22 when she went into prison. And a lot happened during all those years.
Mm-hmm.
So when we came together after prison, we were very different people.
Yeah.
From the people who fell in love with each other
Mm-hmm.
and the two people who stood together there in that dock when we were charged.
Mm-hmm.
We tried hard to make the marriage work.
Yeah.
And out of that process of trying, a beautiful young baby girl was born,
Okay.
named Helen.
Yes.
We named her after Helen Joseph,
Okay.
the liberation struggle icon. But eventually, Yancy and I realized, look, we've grown apart.
Yeah.
Things have been hard on our lives. We had to live our lives and even try to shape our love and our marriage under very difficult circumstances. And we realized that we actually have fallen out of love.
Mm-hmm.
So we finally decided to divorce, but we didn't do so in anger. I still have a huge warmth and affinity for Yancy. She was a wonderful comrade. She was a wonderful woman in my life. And I continue to see her for lunches. We have a daughter together,
Of course.
a beautiful daughter who is now 25
Yes.
and who gave me a grandson. She made me a grandfather.
Yes.
And I'm very proud of her because despite all the turmoil that her parents went through and all the pain, she's turned out into such a very, very full and rounded human being. She's an artist. She lives in Hogsback in the Eastern Cape. She produces beautiful art. She writes books.
Yes.
I can show you here on the table is one of the books that she had written.
Okay.
And
then
she illustrates her own books. It's a children's book that she wrote.
Mm-hmm.
She lives a beautiful, very humble, simple life as an artist, together with her husband and the young boy who she decided to name Forest, because they live in the forest.
Okay.
So that's Helen.
Yes.
I was married twice after that.
Okay.
And out of those marriages came one more child that I love dearly, and that is Kanya, who is now 13 years old.
Okay.
And I love Kanya because Kanya is so much like me.
Okay.
She's outspoken.
All right.
She's got very strong views.
Mm-hmm.
She loves debating. She's at her school. She's one of the main debaters. In fact, yesterday she sent me a message. She calls me Dada.
Okay.
She said, Dada, I won the competition again.
Okay.
That's the debating competition.
Yes.
So I love Kanya very much.
Yes.
And I'm married now to a young woman, Nolutandu.
Okay.
And Noluthando brought huge peace in my life because she is a young woman with a great inner strength. I think she's much more mature than the age that she is would show.
Okay.
There's a young boy, child, Nkanyezi,
Okay.
who's turning 5 in the next few weeks.
Okay.
I'm happy to have a happy family life. I can see how my involvement in politics and my liberation struggle history has costed me relationships.
Yes, yes.
Because I dedicated my life to the liberation struggle. And I must be honest, I neglected my marriages because of that, because I was all the time involved in the liberation struggle.
Yeah.
And it did take its toll.
Yes.
But I'm grateful that even those marriages that had broken up, I'm still on a very, very good and strong relationship with all those partners,
Yes.
with all those women that were in my life.
Yes.
I still see all of them. We still talk, we chat, we laugh, we talk on the phone.
Okay.
And when it was my 60th birthday, all of them came to my 60th birthday and they all spoke.
Yeah.
And one of my friends, Supramo Mupelu, was sitting next to me. He says, "You're a very, very courageous man to allow ex-wives to speak." And but they all spoke with so much love.
Yes.
And all of them said, "Well, you know, if it wasn't for the circumstances,
Yes.
we would have been still together."
Yeah.
But that's life. And I've got this image that the day I die, all those women will come and stand at my graveside.
Okay.
And I know they
That's
will
nice.
be there.
Yeah.
And I have this hope, and I know it will happen, if it happens that I pass on before them, that they will also support my wife, Nolly.
Yes.
Because they're all friends, they talk to each other. So it's not like many people say, when a marriage breaks up, it becomes an antagonistic thing and, you know, it's over. I continue to have this warm relationship with all of them. And I'm very happy that my wife is mature enough to deal with it, and she deals with it in a beautiful way. So at the age of 63, I think I'm fortunate to be in a very happy marriage.
Yes.
With a woman who is a strong person in her own right. She runs her own small business. She designs clothes.
Okay.
She makes them herself. She does, so it's very personal and very special what she does. And she shares my political ideals, my
Actually,
beliefs.
that's what I wanted to ask. What does she think about Areta?
She loves it.
She loves
She
it.
supports me. At the launch of Areta, she was there in the Areta clothes.
Yes.
So there's 100% support.
Yes.
And I'm very happy that I have this marriage, and I have, you know, that a situation where your home can be a safe haven.
Yeah.
Because so often out there it's rough and tough, and there's a lot of attacks. But if you're able to come home at the end of the day and there's warmth and there's a safe haven, it's a good thing.
Yeah. Mr. Niehaus, I'm interested in your story with the MK. Well, somebody said that you are not in the MK, but I think it has to do with the fact that maybe they think they're right because you are not in exile. And the MK is located in exile when most people don't realize that they had operatives in the country.
Moss, it's a sick joke, that.
Yes.
And it comes back to one of the factionalist supporters of Cyril Ramaphosa,
Okay.
who was heading the so-called committee that decides on the verification
Okay.
of military veterans,
Okay.
General Mushale.
Okay.
And the moment I walked into that verification meeting, he started shouting because he was already angry just to see me.
Yeah.
And he knows very well
Yes.
that the narrative that he was pushing was a load of rubbish.
Yes.
He knows very well that Umkhonto we Sizwe operated in camps outside the country and got training.
Okay.
He also knows that there were those inside the country working, setting up the infrastructure for Umkhonto soldiers who came from outside to come in.
Yes.
He also knows that MK veterans were involved in the process of mobilization in the townships of the communities.
Yes.
Comrade Oliver Tambo made a very clear announcement in the early 1970s saying we have our external bases and we have our internal machinery.
Yes.
There are many recordings of those statements that he also made again on Radio Freedom.
Yes.
So Mshole knows very well
Yes.
where I came from. He knows that I'm trained as a soldier of Umkhonto we Sizwe.
Okay.
He knows very well that I had left the country from time to get training, but that there was a decision that I should stay inside the country
Yes.
and work in the underground activities of Umkhonto we Sizwe. But he wanted to try and besmirch my name because it was now a factional political campaign
Yes.
that was being driven against me.
Yes.
Also because of the position that I had taken as part of the leadership of the Umkhonto we Sizwe Military Veterans Association in favor of President Jacob Zuma.
Yes.
Because we spoke out so strongly about the unfairness of the manner in which President Zuma has been treated. So that committee, despite the fact that they were shouting and screaming at me and questioning my credentials, at the end of that meeting he had no other option
Yes.
but to sign the certificate of acknowledging me. And his signature is on that certificate
Okay.
as a member of Umkhonto we Sizwe.
Yes.
After he signed that certificate, he then phones a friend of his at the Citizen, a lady journalist,
Yes.
and tells her a different story that I'm not verified as a member of as a
After
military
he signed.
veteran. After he signed it.
Yes.
Now I'm still involved in a court case against him.
Yes.
Defamation cases takes years to be finalized.
Yes.
But I'm suing that man because he tried to besmirch my name. He was lying through his teeth. He was acting in a factional political way with the sacred history of the African National Congress and of the liberation struggle.
Yes.
I have been and I will be for the rest of my life a soldier of Umkhonto we Sizwe.
Yes.
I'm a proud soldier of Umkhonto we Sizwe. I know the actions that I carried out. You
carried
can
some
go
action.
back to my own court record. Go and read my court record where it is stated that I have planted limpet mines at certain places in the northwest province, which was then the old Western Transvaal, at police stations, that I exploded a pamphlet bomb right in the Carlton Center at the South African Defence Force Recruitment Center in the Carlton Center, that I was part of reconnaissance to identify targets of Umkhonto we Sizwe, the gasworks here in Johannesburg, and also that I gave detailed plans of how MK could infiltrate the South African Broadcasting Corporation, the SABC, where the nerve points was that had to be sabotaged and how we could close the SABC down. All of that evidence was presented in court. It's part of the court record.
Yes.
But today my credentials of me as a member of Umkhonto we Sizwe must be questioned by a man himself who, when he was in exile, was questioned whether he was not a spy for the apartheid regime, who was actually detained by the ANC security services under the understanding that he was an apartheid spy. That same man now comes in the liberated South Africa and try and cast doubt on my name.
So when you were arrested for all those things that you mentioned?
Yeah, it's in my court record.
It's in a court record. How were you arrested? Because you're supposed to be underground. How did they find you and how did they arrest you?
Well, they infiltrated the ANC cell that I was working with, but with a security police officer, who obviously presented himself as someone who was pro the liberation struggle, and he became involved in that cell.
White guy, black guy?
White guy.
Okay.
A man with the name of Robert Whitecross.
Okay.
Which sometimes in my mind I play around and said I should have known because he was Whitecross was going to double cross.
Yes.
Yeah. But yeah, that was how I got eventually exposed.
Okay.
And on the 23rd of August 1983, the evening, I had just returned from Cape Town, where in Mitchell's Plain I attended the meeting of the launch of the United Democratic Front, which was then launched.
Yes.
I was quite tired. I was fast asleep in my student house in Berea.
Okay.
And I woke up and I looked down the barrel of a R5 machine gun. And the security policeman was standing over me at the bed with a gun pushed against my head.
Yeah.
So they moved in, they tore the house apart. They were looking for if they could find any documents or anything that obviously they hoped would further incriminate me.
Okay.
But at the time, they already had a lot of information from this police infiltrator.
Yes.
So I was then arrested together with my then fiancée, Yancy, and we were taken to John Foster Square.
Okay.
And kept in solitary confinement for a number of months, and quite, as I said, months, yes. And as I said, as I told you earlier, badly tortured. I was really very, very badly tortured. And they wanted to try and get information from me about what our operations were, who did I work with, and all of that. But I'm proud to say I didn't tell them anything. They were ready to kill me. They sometimes pushed me half of my body outside the window on the 10th floor. Said to me, "You're going down there, speak." I didn't speak.
You didn't speak?
No, I never compromised anyone.
Yeah.
I drove them crazy with anger that I wasn't prepared to speak, but I never spoke.
And the torture continued?
And the torture went on for months.
So this solitary confinement, they just don't leave you there alone?
No, no, no.
They visit you?
They leave you for a few days. You start losing, you know, contact with reality when it's day and night because the cells are dark and all of that. And then suddenly they will come and grab you, drag you up to the 10th floor, start beating you up, start with the process of sleep deprivation that for 2-3 nights you're not allowed to sleep, trying to break you.
Okay.
So I went through all of that.
Yeah.
And some of it, I think, was also just from their side that they really wanted to inflict as much pain as possible because they actually had the information to charge me because they gathered that information through the infiltration.
Yes.
But eventually I was charged.
Okay.
And as I've told you, I was sentenced for high treason, and I was given a 15-year sentence, of which I served 10 years because the negotiations started, and that whole process of how President Zuma assisted to eventually get me out of prison during that run up to the final negotiations eventually led to my release. It was published in the court record. It was on the front pages of the newspapers. There was a long article in the New York Times about all these activities that I was charged with.
Yes.
The headline was, Umkhonto we Sizwe soldier sentenced to 15 years in prison. That was the headline.
Yes.
But today, some guy who himself has a very checkered history and was questioned whether he was not part of the apartheid regime and a spy for the apartheid regime, want to come and question my credibility. I will never forgive that guy. You know, these people humiliated me, boss.
Yes.
I have been a member of the ANC for 43 years.
Yes.
They decided to bring charges against me on the most flimsy pretext you can imagine.
Yeah.
To try and kick me out of the African National Congress.
Yes.
When I was going through that disciplinary hearing, the convener of that disciplinary committee, together with the prosecutor,
Okay.
it was on a Zoom platform,
Okay.
were talking to each other, but they thought that myself and my legal representative were excluded
From that.
that they
platform.
were not audible, but they were.
Yeah.
And they were saying to each other, we must move fast because Cyril wants him to be expelled before the conference.
Wow.
So I said to them, I can hear you.
Yeah.
Then they suddenly stopped the audio.
Yes.
But the day after they said that was the Sunday when they were busy with the disciplinary hearing. That Monday, they expelled me.
Yes.
They didn't even show me the simple dignity of sending me first a letter,
Yeah.
of telling me that I'm being expelled from the ANC.
Yes.
They just threw that expulsion notice into the public domain.
Yeah. So
I was called by journalists and told, you're expelled. Before I
before you
even
knew.
heard it.
Before you even knew.
Now, I've been for 43 years
Yeah.
in the ANC.
Yeah.
I sat 10 years in prison.
Yeah.
I fought.
Yes.
That's how I get treated. That's how I get treated.
Yeah.
I must hear from a journalist, you are expelled. I appealed my expulsion.
Okay.
And in terms of the ANC constitution, when you appeal your expulsion, the expulsion is suspended.
Okay.
So your membership remains intact.
Yes. While they're dealing with the issues.
Yes.
Yes.
So I went to the accreditation center for the conference and I
Yes.
said, here I am. I'm a delegate, number one delegate from my branch.
Yes.
I'm a former member of the National Executive Committee of the ANC.
Yes.
On both those scores, I've got the right to accreditation to attend the conference.
Yeah.
You know what they did? The manager of the ANC, Phoebe Potgieter, brought 2 policemen. They took me under my arms and they threw me out. In front of all my comrades.
Yeah.
People were there, these Cyril supporters, they were there laughing at me. Go, go, go. From the moment that I laid those charges until I was eventually fired, it took them 4 hours. 4 hours.
Yeah.
They sent me a letter saying, we intend to fire you, give reasons. They gave me 1 hour to provide the reasons. I did provide the reasons why I should not be fired. An hour after that, I get another letter, you are fired. And Mashatile is directly involved in that process, together with the rest of that national office bearers.
Yes.
I appealed that decision to fire me. Now, in terms of the law, once you've appealed, that appeal must be heard.
Yes.
And until that appeal is heard, you must be paid your salary. He went to the paymaster of the ANC, the person who does the payroll, and said to him, stop paying Carl now.
Yes.
And that guy said to him, but TG, what you are instructing me to do is illegal.
Yes.
He said, I know, but I don't care. Because by the time he's able to get into court to change this, he will be on the street begging for his life, begging for food, because he won't have any income. And that is exactly where I want him. The same man that I recruited into the ANC.
Yeah.
Now, what kind of monster is that? What kind of human being is that?
I heard that you were one of the last prisoners to be released during liberation. Can you tell?
Well, you see, when the advance team of the African National Congress from exile came back, they were led by President Jacob Zuma.
Yes.
He was the leader of that advance team.
Yes.
And one of the conditions, the instruction that they got from the national executive of the ANC when they left Lusaka, was you have to negotiate the release of our comrades from prison.
From prison, yes.
And we cannot enter the final negotiating phase as long as there's still our comrades in prison.
Yes.
So Comrade Jacob Zuma and his team did a good job in pushing that point.
Yeah.
But they were told at some point by Kobie Coetzee, who was then the Minister of Justice and Correctional Services,
Yes.
we will release these ANC prisoners, but that Boertjie, we will not release.
Not release.
Because he's a verraaier. He's a traitor.
Yeah, okay.
And I still have a very vivid memory of one weekend when I was called to the visiting rooms of the prison.
Okay.
And when I walked in there, Comrade Jacob Zuma was there.
Okay.
And he had specially come to see me.
Yes.
And he said to me, Comrade Carl, they are resisting to release you. I want you to be strong. I promise you. And I remember he took my hands, he held them like this. He said, I promise you, you will come out.
Yes.
I will fight for you.
Yes.
And after that visit, he used to come every second weekend, he would be there,
Yes.
coming to check him, finding out if I'm okay. And every time when he left the prison, he would call my parents. Now, my parents weren't waiting for a call from Jacob Zuma.
Yeah.
In fact, they didn't want that call. And they were not very pleasant with him when he called. But he still called and said to them, I've met your son. He's okay. We're taking care. We will get him out.
Okay.
And you know, one of those visits I came, and just the day before he came again to visit me, the prison warders called me the morning and they said, pack your stuff.
Okay.
So you get excited. You know there's a chance that you can be released. So I packed my stuff, everything ready. With great excitement, I went to the admin office.
Yes.
And got there, they said, we're just doing an inventory.
Really?
Just having a look at if you have everything. You thought you're going to be released.
No.
Go back to your cell.
Yes.
So I told him the next day, this is what they'd done. And he got furious.
Yeah.
And he apparently he left from that prison and he phoned Kobie Coetzee.
Yes.
And he said to him, now you're going to release this man. Or I promise you, the actions that I'm going to take will bring these negotiations to a halt.
Yeah.
2 days later, I was released.
Yes.
Now, there's many people who say to me, why do you show the loyalty that you showed to Jacob Zuma?
Yes.
That man stood with me.
Yes.
I was a young man. I was a whitey.
Yes.
He was under no obligation to do so. I'm sure there were many of his other comrades who would have said to him, man, leave him.
Yes.
We'll get him out later. He didn't do that. He showed me so much loyalty.
Yes.
Now, how can I betray him today?
Yeah.
I will never do that.
Yeah.
I will stand by Jacob Zuma until the day that either him or me are the first to go. I still have such a vivid memory of when I was released. You know, I came out of prison.
Yes.
There were a few comrades there to receive me.
Okay.
We drove from Pretoria to Johannesburg on the highway. Those
you were
days, Midrand wasn't as developed as it is now.
Yes.
But I still have that sense of, for the first time, I could look far.
Yes.
I could see the wind in the grass.
Yes.
I opened the windows in the car. I didn't want any windows closed. I just wanted the air
Yes.
to come in to breathe.
Yes.
Okay?
Yes. Yes.
And I met with Yancy, my fiancée. And after I met with her, I said, now I have to go to report to the ANC.
Yes.
And everyone looked at me and said, you just released from prison.
Yeah.
At least spend the day with us. I said, no.
Okay.
Take me to where the ANC then had a temporary office, because it was unbanned, of course, already, in the center of Johannesburg. I said, take me there.
Yes.
I now have to report.
Yes.
I'm out, I'm ready to work.
Yes.
So I went there that afternoon.
Okay.
I met with some of the leadership of the ANC, and they said to me, what do you want to do?
Okay.
You know, I mean, you were a student, you were a soldier. I said, I think I've been thinking about it in prison. I want to work in media.
Okay.
They said, what experience do you have? I said, no, only my political beliefs.
Yeah.
But I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
So I was then taken to the old Department of Information and Publicity.
Okay.
It was called by the abbreviation DIP.
Okay.
The head of that department at that time was Paulo Jordan.
Okay.
And Paulo he's a great comrade, but he can sometimes be an arrogant man.
Okay.
Then he looked me up and down. He said, yeah, what do you want to do?
Okay.
I said, I can write. I want to write press statements. He said, okay, find a desk.
Okay.
So I went, I sat down. For a week, Paulo didn't speak to me.
Okay.
But I kept on getting instructions, write this, write that, and I would write. Then they started bringing in computers. I've never seen a computer in my life. During the time that I was in prison, that's when the whole IT revolution took place.
Yes.
So I'm computer illiterate.
Yeah.
And I said, the first thing I need to do is I must go for a course. I must know how to use a computer.
Yes.
So I went for the course, I learned. And then one day, Paulo walked past and he stopped at my desk. He says, let's go and have lunch.
Okay.
We went to lunch and he said, you know, I've been looking at your writings. You are good.
Okay.
Let's work.
All right.
And within a year, I was made first the head of the media liaison unit of the ANC.
Okay.
After that, I was then made, and this was the most incredible honor that had been given to me. I'm a white little boy.
Yeah.
I'm in my early 30s.
Yes.
Yeah? Which is young in the ANC.
Yeah.
And I get called in by the NEC and they said, we're making you the national spokesperson of the ANC.
Yeah.
And I became, in that process, also the spokesperson for President Mandela.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Spokesperson.
And I am given the opportunity to write speeches for President Mandela.
Okay.
It was such an honor.
Yes.
You know, and I still have many of the copies of those speeches that I wrote, because I wrote speeches for him when he went to the Western Cape to address the colored community. I would write them in Afrikaans for him. And then we would sit and practice.
Okay.
Because Madiba spoke Afrikaans in a Xhosa accent. But he was prepared to listen and to be helped.
Okay.
I was given the incredible opportunity to go with him to Stockholm and to Oslo when he received the Nobel Peace Prize.
Yes.
And I wrote the speech that he delivered for the accepting the Nobel Peace Prize.
Yes.
I wrote the speech when the night when the ANC was announced the victor.
Okay.
In the first democratic elections, and he first addressed the gathering at the Carlton Hotel.
Okay.
I wrote that speech for him.
Yes.
And I still have the original copy.
Okay.
Because Madiba was like a school teacher, you know, he would always take out of his inside pocket a red pen.
Okay.
And with him, you couldn't give it to him on a screen because he was before computers.
Yeah.
So you must print it out.
Okay.
Then he sits very slowly, very carefully. If there's a punctuation error, if there's a spelling error, in a red pen he corrects it, like a teacher.
Yeah.
And then eventually we'll go through it, he'll make his suggestions, you bring him the next copy, then he approves it.
Yes.
So I have that speech that he made
Okay.
when he announced that the ANC is the victor
Okay.
in the 27th of April 1994 elections.
Okay.
And some of those speeches, and I've written many, tens of speeches I wrote for him.
Yeah.
But some of those speeches is now in a book that is called The 100 Speeches That Made the Biggest Difference in the World.
Yes.
And there are 3 of his speeches in there, and all 3 of those speeches I've written. So it's a huge honor,
Yes.
you know, and it was a great honor to work in the presence of a man like Nelson Mandela. And then in 1997, President Mandela made me South Africa's ambassador to the Netherlands, which was a big honor.
A very big ambassadorship.
Yeah, it was a good ambassadorship and it was a big honor
Yes.
for him to give it to me. And I was very honored that during the time that I was ambassador, he had a state visit to the Netherlands. Now that's always the highlight of an ambassador, to get your president to come as a state visit to the country where you are posted.
Yes.
So that happened, and the relations between the Netherlands and South Africa, I think, improved hugely during that time.
Okay.
I think I was a successful ambassador because I spoke about the long history between South Africa and the Netherlands, which is a colonial history. So I didn't mince my words about the exploitation that the South African people suffered under Dutch colonialism and, of course, later on British colonialism. And when I first walked into the embassy, I found to my shock that on the one wall in the main entrance hall there was a photo hanging of Jan van Riebeeck.
Okay.
This is now the South African embassy in The Hague.
Yes.
And I said, what is that thing doing there?
Yeah.
They said, no, you know, the previous ambassador didn't want to remove it because they feared they're going to insult the Dutch people if they do so. I said, get that thing down into the basement now.
Yeah.
That is the man that brought hell to South Africa.
Yeah.
And Madiba and the Dutch queen, the then Dutch queen, she's now abdicated and retired, Queen Beatrix. They had a very good relationship and they got along very well. Madiba used to call her my queen.
Okay.
I thought, okay, the Dutch may not like that I've removed this Dutchman from the wall.
Okay.
But I said to my secretary, let us find the most beautiful picture of Madiba and Queen Beatrix together.
Okay.
Let's frame it.
All right.
And put it there where that
Replacing-
gap on the wall is where we removed the colonist Jan van Riebeeck.
Yeah.
And I did that.
Okay.
And I think
Good
it
diplomacy.
worked. I think it worked.
Yes.
No one complained.
Okay.
Everyone understood why I did it. I even did a newspaper article about it, why I did it. Because I've always got, throughout my life, I had this view, you don't hide what you think. You say and state your beliefs, because if you do that, you disarm people.
Okay.
If you do things in secret and they find out, they use it against you because they say, you see, it was ashamed because of that and that. But you just state your case,
Okay.
you do it properly, you defend where you stand.
Yeah.
And that in itself is your biggest defense
Yeah.
for your ideals. After Madiba retired, there should have been a continuation of working for the full liberation program.
Yes.
And Thabo had a unique opportunity to do that because he had a 2/3 majority.
Yes.
The people of the country gave the ANC incredible power.
Yes.
But he did nothing with it. He wasted that 2/3 majority. Instead of continuing with expanding on the RDP program, he brought in new liberal economic policies under the name of GEAR, and it destroyed the hopes of our people.
Yeah.
It prevented us from fundamentally and radically transforming our economy. And we betrayed the hopes that the majority of South Africans had for full liberation, which must, and I repeat it again because I've said it so many times in this discussion, must be full economic liberation. So the ANC failed the people of South Africa. The ANC could have, even after that compromised, negotiated process, could have changed things to empower the people of this country, but it never did so. Yeah. And it never did so because there were those infiltrated into the ANC who had a clear instruction what to do, and that was to prevent economic liberation in this country. And they carried out that job, sadly I must say, very well, because they were paid. And in the process of them having been paid, they were compromised. So why am I telling you all of this? Because the African Radical Economic Transformation Alliance, of which I'm the president and which we formed in February this year, said we cannot allow this to happen.
Yes.
We must develop a progressive economic program. We did call it our 10-point plan, in order to implement radical economic transformation. And we must do so because we return to the original ideals for full liberation of the ANC. We are committed to those ideals. And I'm not sitting here today with this action that we've taken and this party that we have formed out of bitterness.
No.
No, I'm hurt by what happened. Every South African should be hurt. But I said we must be proactive. We mustn't be driven by hate, we mustn't be driven by anger. We must be driven by the ideals for which we joined the liberation struggle in the first place. And we must now create organizations and structures that can still implement those ideals. And those ideals must be given expression in economic liberation. And we must work for the radical economic transformation of this country. And at the foundation, the absolute bare minimum of that economic liberation must be the return of the land to the people. Expropriation of land without compensation. So remember, Moss, I said you can't pay for stolen goods.
You can't.
It must be returned without any pay. So part of the plan for the African Radical Economic Transformation Alliance is also that we must work together with all other progressive political parties and civil society organizations who are committed to these same ideals. We have presented that 10-point plan as a foundation on which we all can come together. And we say, let's form an alliance.
That's why you call it an alliance.
Progressive forces. That's why the word alliance is in the name of Areta. Let's form an alliance of all the progressive forces so that we can remove Ramaphosa from power, get rid of this sellout thing that is still trying to call itself ANC, and put a progressive people's government in place that will return back to those original ideals of full liberation. And I'm taking you back to what I said right at the beginning of this interview. That message that I listened to when I was 19 years old in the garage of Oombay, on the Radio Freedom, when Comrade Oliver Tambo said, liberation is not just liberation from racism, but it's liberation of economic oppression. And That is the ideal that Areta stands for.
Mr. Niehaus, thank you very much for allowing me into your space and for such a grand narrative.